Hello, welcome again, everyone, to our Wednesday News Hour, where we hear from social entrepreneurs and their teams around the world about timely topics and solutions. My name is Corina Murafa, and I co-lead Ashoka's work on plant and climate. We're really thrilled to have many of you joining today from our global community. And for the next 30 minutes, we'll be hearing from Ashoka Fellow James Thornton about the power of the law to bring companies and governments on board in global climate action. He's the founder and CEO of ClientEarth, an environmental nonprofit with a unique approach. They basically use the power of law to change the system for a brighter, healthier future. And James and his team are behind multiple successful lawsuits against governments worldwide on various topics, from air pollution to sustainable seafood. ClientEarth has determined the UK Supreme Court to issue their first ever environmental injunction and was behind the European Commission's ban over illegally harvested rainforest timber. I was reading earlier on your website what sort of progress you've been making in the past years, and I'm fascinated. I could go on and on by mentioning what you guys are doing. So please, everyone, when you have a bit of time to spare, just take a look at their website or Twitter or social media. It's quite impressive. But I'll stop here and pass it over to James, who's really been his entire life dedicated to environmental causes. And just wanted to ask you, James, to kick us off. What brought you to determine to use law as a lever for environmental action, and whether really law is the answer that we're also hungry for as we're seeing the environmental crisis unfolding?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me very much, Karina, and it is great to be with you all today. So why the law? Well, I, as a young guy, all environmentalists that I've ever spoken to are environmentalists because they fell in love with nature. And there's a very deep emotional connection as a child, and that allows you to understand the interconnectivity of humans and nature. And when you fall in love with something, you want to take care of it. So I was first on my way to become a biologist, and I love biology, I love science. But then by the time I got to university, it was becoming clear what sort of damage people were doing. And I come from a family of lawyers. My father was a law professor, and I have three brothers, all lawyers. So I didn't really want to become a lawyer, but I thought, well, and environmental law didn't really exist back when I went to law school. But I thought law is really powerful. And if I become a lawyer, maybe I can figure out what to do with it. That turned out to be true. So I think to your question, I don't think is the answer. I think it's a very, very powerful part of the answer. So what law allows you to do is, when you do it in our way, you can go into parliaments and help write laws. You mentioned timber regulation, for example, and I can give you many other examples. And you do all of that writing of laws based on the science. So I called the organization ClientEarth because the idea is the earth and everyone who lives on her is the client. So everyone on the call today, you've never met me, but I'm your lawyer because I'm trying to stop climate change and preserve nature. And that's the idea. But if the earth is your client, how do you speak with her? And the idea is through the grammar of science. So we follow the science, help write laws in parliaments that reflect the best science, and then enforce them in courts. And it's true, we now do that quite globally, all of this work. Europe, we started it in Africa, Asia, we work a lot in China, we're beginning to work in the US. And you can achieve very powerful leverage. And let me stop there and with that idea and then see where you want to go. But what's very cool about law is that the leverage is very high. So, and I say it's only part.
Would you mind? Sorry for interrupting, but I think that's a super interesting point, and I don't think it's so obvious. Like, what do you mean by this leverage?
By leverage, yeah, okay. So, if you're going to try and get society to take care of the environment when governments are going too slowly and corporations are going too slowly, what are you going to do? And there are various important parts. So one is people demonstrating, and PR around that. So political demonstration, kids staying out of schools, all types of demonstration, extremely important, all kinds of social activism. When you add law to it, you can force governments to do things and force companies to do things that they would not otherwise have done. You know, I learned a lot about even 2 million people marching when I marched against Tony Blair taking the UK into the Iraq War. And 2 million people marched against the Iraq War. And 2 days later, without paying any attention whatsoever, he went to war. I thought, wow, that's a really anti-democratic stance. So I couldn't have brought a lawsuit about that, but I and my colleagues have stopped a whole generation of coal-fired power stations in Europe by bringing lawsuits. In Poland recently, I mean, we'd stopped 30 in Poland, and the government said it was going to build one last coal-fired power station. So we tried a completely new technique. You keep innovating, and you say, what areas of law can you use that have not been used before? And we thought, well, climate change is really all about the money. It's really where society invests its money. Is it still in fossil fuels, or can it be made to move more quickly out of fossil fuels into renewables, for example? So stage one is you stop all investment in coal insofar as you can. And we started in Europe, and now we're doing it in Asia. But they weren't susceptible with this last coal plant to the usual environmental cases. So we said, let's use corporate law. And we won't call it an environmental case. It's a case with an environmental result. But we bought 30 euros worth of shares in the company. And we produced an economic study from a good economist group saying this was a bad investment coal because renewables were cheaper and would be a better investment for the company. And then when the company didn't go along, we sued the officers and directors personally. And this is a big company. And we sued them personally, and we won. And the next day, the stock went up 4%. So this is a beautiful situation in which the market actually agreed with the environmental position expressed through corporate law. But there wasn't any other way to stop that. The government was hell-bent on building it. And that's one example of leverage.
But governments and corporations are still resisting, you know, so like they pay a fine, they get another lawsuit and so on. I mean, I don't think that the laws in Brazil or in Poland are environmentally damaging. And I think that people have won cases in Poland as you have, but still, you know, the Polish government is very much still pro-fossil fuels, and the Brazilian establishment as well. So, I mean, you know, like, is society catching up with all these court movements, or is it still lagging behind? Because in my opinion, but maybe because I'm a social scientist, you know, like, I think that society also needs to catch up with this wins and successes in courts.
Well, yes. So that's why I'm saying it's not the only thing. So I was saying the political demonstrations and the work of lots of people, very important. PR and news and stories about all these things, very important, and about the cases and about the problems the cases address. The cases, which is why we always work with dozens of groups when we do these things. But in Poland, even lawsuits, the Polish government, you're right. I mean, we have an office of 30 people in Warsaw. The Polish government is a dreadfully right-wing government that is very insensitive to these issues. But nevertheless, we've stopped all these coal-fired power stations by using law against the companies that were building them. And even in Poland, you can force the government to do the right thing. So right-wing governments, for some reason, always love to cut down forests. I don't know. Right-wing men. For some reason, they love to cut down ancient forests. I don't know what it is. It's a kind of mental illness. So then one of the greatest forests left in Europe is the Białowieża forest in Poland and Belarusia. And this government came in and they started illegally cutting. It wasn't possible to bring a case in Poland. So we built the case and went to the European Commission, convinced them they had to bring this case, which they could do against Poland. And we worked with a coalition of people that was the broadest coalition I've ever worked with. It went all the way from anarchists on the left to central people to monarchists on the right. And they all agreed that saving the forest was the most important thing that could be done. So you had this very broad coalition supporting it. And the European Commission then came in, brought a case in the European Court that we worked on with them, won, and got huge daily fines imposed against Poland. And Poland stopped cutting the forest. And they fired the forestry minister. So that was personally satisfying to see the forestry minister sacked.
That's a good story. I really liked your story about buying $30 shares in a company and then doing shareholder activism. And it reminded me of recent moves with large multinationals in the US, Exxon and the others that were brought to a different course of action by shareholder activism. I was just wondering, moving on from governments who are sometimes insensitive to this sort of stuff, except when it's combined maybe with power, media power and so on. How about corporations? Do you think you're going to be moving them faster to change how they invest their money by using the power of strategic litigation?
Well, of law, and not only strategic litigation. So back to the money question, we about 5 years ago said, starting with the UK, where is the money that gets invested? And a tremendous amount of the money is in pension funds. A tremendous amount of money in pension funds. And the pension funds were not considering climate change at all in their investments. So we wound up getting the law changed so that now pension fund managers are required in the UK only at this point to look at climate change risk and manage their portfolios, taking account of climate change risk, which begins to move the money away from companies who are doing the wrong thing to companies that are doing the right thing. So that's a case of changing laws, which has definitely changed behavior. And I was talking to the CEO of Fortune Inc., so Fortune magazine, Fortune 500, works with companies. Talking to him yesterday, and he said, your work trying to enforce corporate law to get better corporate reporting, to stop greenwashing, something that we also work on, and to get companies to act like governments are supposed to act under the Paris Agreement, he said, is all very timely. And he said, we work with 250 CEOs, and it was encouraging. He said, the 2021 is the year when I've seen tremendous change from the big corporations. They finally really get it, that they have to do something about this. And they really have to change their behavior. They're getting it from shareholders. They're getting it from changes in the law that we do. And a lot of their shareholder resolutions that have made those differences are ones that we've written behind the scenes, working with the shareholder groups. So he said 2021 is the year when I've really seen the mind of the best CEOs change. So, it's all not fast enough, which is why I expect to sue a pension fund in the next 6 months, is why I expect to sue oil and gas companies in America. Then you make examples of the worst actors, and you then encourage other people to move faster even than the law requires.
I would encourage our attendants to also post questions in the Q&A section of our conversation, because we're probably going to move towards that one very soon. So if you were to recap, James, it's about changing the rules of the game, right? Yeah. Through the power of the law, but also through the power of individual cases that then bring about bigger change. And do you think that's gonna, make all these corporations that are now pledging to net zero actually change practices, behaviors, procedures? And at the end of the day, isn't still profit maximization what they're for, what they're supposed to be existing for as a corporation? Yes, just playing the devil's advocate here,
No, I mean, that's why the corporations are set up. But the point is that they can that they will play by whatever the rules are, and the rules have not been in favor of environmental sensitivity, and they have not been in favor of stopping climate change. The rules have encouraged all of the worst behavior. So that's why the rules need to change. So we spend a lot of time, about half of our time, changing the rules of the game. It's a very good way to think about them, and then enforcing the rules of the game. So you need to do both. So the legislation certainly needs to change. And then I know we're going to get to the COP, but you absolutely need government action. But when the governments aren't doing as much as they should, private, so NGO use of the law definitely speeds things up. And it forces governments to do things in other ways. For example, Germany was recently ordered by its Supreme Court to do more to speed up its own climate plan. Same in the Netherlands, same in Ireland, and I expect the same to happen in France and Spain. Now, that's a very interesting example of Supreme Courts saying to the country, you have to improve your plan and improve your compliance. And then you need force sometimes to move these things in. And then it just becomes what people do. I mean, when we won this big air quality case against the UK, requiring them to clean up the air, they started to put plans in place, which they never would have done. And now we've brought cases in 20 European countries. The same is happening, so that countries and regions within countries are beginning to come up with plan or sometimes in the middle already of plans now that will clean up the air. And that would have never happened without, even when the law was there, it would have never happened without the litigation, because frequently what can happen is that pretty good laws get passed. The citizens who are paying attention say, oh, that's nice, that's now taken care of. Politicians say, we look great, and then, wash their hands and go away, and everyone forgets. So that's another value of bringing these cases.
You mentioned the COP26, and it's just around the corner. I want to bring you to that conversation. What do you hope to achieve? It's one of those events that we're all expecting so much from, and then we always end up being disappointed. But how about this year? Is it going to be different? What do you think?
It's a great question, and I'm optimistic, but then I'm an eternal optimist. So and I have to be an eternal optimist. So going into the COP, a few things. What do we need out of it? Well, we need countries to offer and promise and then go through with much bigger cuts than they have so far, because the cuts that have so far been put on the table will not get the world to the 1.5 degree or less than 2 degree limit that the Paris Agreement set. So we need greater ambition, and ambition in these is a technical term in these negotiations, greater ambition. And also much greater finance going from the developed to the developing world. The Paris Agreement promised 100 billion a year to go from the developed to the developing world for climate by 2020, and it hasn't happened. So we're not paying 100 billion a year yet, and 100 billion a year is nowhere near what is in fact required. It's much higher than that, particularly given that the developing countries' economies were hit by COVID badly, much more than the developed world's economies. So money is a really essential ingredient in these talks. And people are saying the right things. I mean, the American government's saying the right things. Boris Johnson is saying the right things, but we'll see what happens. A couple of encouraging things. I can give you a lot of discouraging things, but who cares? Two encouraging things coming in are the U.S. government did throw in another $5 billion. That's good, not enough, but good. And China, a couple of weeks ago, we do a lot of work in China. And China is one of those places where it's about changing the rules of the game. So for the last 7 years, we've been working closely with the Supreme Court in China and the prosecutors in China. And we've trained 1,500 judges to decide environmental cases. And we've trained prosecutors to bring environmental cases. And we got a thank you letter from the prosecutors, the federal prosecutors in China a few weeks ago now, saying, thank you for all your help. You've brought environmental litigation in the public interest to China. And in this year, based on our cooperation, they were referring to 2020, in the year 2020, we have initiated 80,000 environmental cases. So this is an interesting story, a very important story about China that the West doesn't know. One hears bad stories about China, and I'm not going to dispute any of that. But in addition, they're pushing very hard to bring environmental regulation up to the same standards as it is in Europe. And of course, it needs to even go beyond that. One of the other things we've been working on is to convince China to stop investing in coal, and particularly to stop investing in coal in the developing world, and through what it is called its Belt and Road Initiative. And it was looking to finance, biggest coal financing country in the world, and it was looking to finance hundreds of new coal-fired power stations in Southeast Asia particularly, but then also going over to Africa. And we've been arguing that that's bad for the environment, but also bad for business. One of the really hopeful things that's going on in the background here is that the cost of renewable energy has come down so dramatically that generally everywhere in the world is cheaper than fossil fuels now. So we were able to make that argument to China. And our memo got the favor of the Ministry of Environment, went up to the Politburo. And the decision came down that Xi Jinping announced at the UN 3 weeks ago now, I think, in which he said China will finance no more coal in Belt and Road countries. So that's taking hundreds. We're not trying to calculate how many that is, but hundreds of coal-fired power stations out. And that is, again, a power of law story, because we're there training judges and prosecutors on how to bring cases. And we've developed such deep trust among the progressive people who want to do the right thing, that when we made this argument about coal, which was essentially an economic argument, more than a legal argument, it was taken very seriously and went up all the way to the top, and the decision was favorable. So here the law was also the trust, the doing law with them and helping building their legal system created, allowed us to make that suggestion, and then in such a way that it could be heard. Many people were telling them to do that, but the question is how you can make a suggestion in such a way that someone will listen. You have to be a trusted partner, and doing the legal work made us that.
Yeah, I was reading about China recently. Fascinating. We have a bunch of questions as I was expecting, and I'm going to try to take us through at least a couple of them. One of them is regarding this idea of legal standing for rivers, for waters, for ecosystems, and whether you see a strengthening of this perspective that actually these non-human beings are going to be able to stand up for their own rights somehow in front of the law.
I certainly hope so, because that's the way I feel about things. And I've been very interested in this since, well, 1976. There was a famous article written when I was in law school. And yes, now a number of countries around the world have started experimenting with this. So they have given rights in India and New Zealand and a couple of countries in South America, I think, to rivers. And said that rivers have legal personhood, like a normal person or like a corporation. And then certain people are given the right to go to court on behalf of the river. So, and it's often a group of elders from indigenous people who live in the region in a number of places as that. And I think this is great. It will work in some places more quickly than in others. I think the European system is, how shall I say, a little cynical to allow it to happen right away. At least that's what my European colleagues think, but not all of them. I have one colleague in Germany who wants to bring a case where the plaintiff is the polar bear. And I think this is extremely interesting because polar bears are being threatened, obviously, by climate change. And it makes the case in a very powerful way. So I think it's a cutting edge thing, and I very much want to see it happen. I have to say that I need to persuade a lot of my colleagues to think this is a good approach, because lawyers, not me, but lawyers tend to be conservative. I think it's great.
Well, this really ties into my next question that I again picked up from our attendants about the profession of lawyers, and whether you see a shift in that profession from, as you say, a more conservative one towards a more activist one, whether lawyers start to see themselves as change makers, as we say at Ashoka?
Yes. So no, I spent all my time trying to get the Ashoka DNA into lawyers, you know, and there's an interesting difference between legal culture in Europe and the United States, where I originally came from, and I now have many years of experience in both. And in the US, lawyers have seen themselves as change makers for a long time, and it started with the civil rights movement in the 1950s. Where in order to protect the rights of Black people, lawyers had to get involved. So a lot of lawyers became radical because of the apartheid that was going on in the United States. And then that radicalism or progressivism continued into the environmental movement. So both human rights and the environment are areas in which lawyers have always sought to take a leadership position and really push things. Less in Europe. I think partly because there wasn't a need for a civil rights movement of the same kind. So I think part of it is simply the historical reasons. But what I'm seeing among young lawyers is tremendous enthusiasm for doing this kind of environmental work and really getting it, you know, and that's very encouraging. And now I see it happening, and it's not just Europe and America. We're in touch with lawyers all over the world who are feeling exactly the same thing and are very, very, very interested in being activists. And we work with them now in hundreds of groups, hundreds of NGOs, and lawyers and law firms. I just made a movie today, actually, a very short film to show to the Bar Association in Japan. And the message of the film was simple. It was, climate change is affecting everything and everyone. So every lawyer is now a climate change lawyer. Everyone can use their technical skill in their daily work to do something about this. So I think, yes, things are changing. Of course, not fast enough for me, but things are changing.
Yeah, interesting. How about young people in general? They're increasingly being more and more activist, including using the legal power and basically suing adults for affecting their future and condemning them to an inhumane future. Do you think that's going to take up this trend? Do you see it as being something that's going to grow? Yes, and to go back to the question about nature, you know, even humans anyone in the world really don't have a right to a healthy environment and don't have a right to a healthy future. So you know, it's I think I'm completely in favor of polar bears and trees having legal standing, but we don't even have that for human beings in a good and strong enough way about the environment. It's not there yet. So a lot of the work, a lot of the energy is going there because people care about people. That's mostly what they care about. So as and that's no different from any other species. You know, well, each species mostly cares about its own members, and so do we. So I'm very interested in making sure that people really have these rights, and children who are pushing these rights are doing a wonderful thing. I mean, one of the things we've been doing is bringing other areas of law. So we don't just do environmental law. I was mentioning corporate law. So we brought in all the areas that do that are involved with money. So you know, company law, securities law, banking law, insurance law, pension law, and we use all of those areas of law as tools to try and help stop climate change. But another very important one is human rights law. And this is going to happen, I think, develop very quickly over the next few years. Already, we have 10 human rights lawyers and on our team, and they're bringing human rights arguments into many of the cases we do. So to try and build the understanding that environmental protection and the protection of vulnerable people, lower income people, younger people, is actually a human right that needs to be recognized and enforced not just in, for example, the European Court of Human Rights, but in normal courts, which have the power to give powerful relief, which
both governments and companies actually respect. European Court of Human Rights, governments often delay, but normal courts and the Supreme Court of a country also can use human rights laws to require things to happen. And we're putting a lot of energy on bringing those human rights arguments in, which also makes it then cases that the judges can understand. Because if you're going to win a case, win an argument with anyone, you need to tell a story that moves their heart and their emotions. It's not just purely intellectual. And when you can appropriately represent the human rights of individuals being affected, then it really matters.
We cannot get to all the questions that we have, unfortunately, lots of interesting ones. So I'm just gonna wrap it up by asking you a very broad, question. As you look ahead in the next 5 years, what excites you about your work and about what you're seeing globally when it comes to climate action?
Well, I mean, what I'm seeing is this tremendous awakening when it comes to the climate. The way I think about it is that environmental problems, quite literally, are mental problems. So that when people awaken and see for the first time, as many are doing now, it really is a problem. The fires are burning everywhere. The floods are happening everywhere. It's real. Then the attention shifts, and then we can make change very, very, very rapidly. Because essentially we know what we need to do. It's not a mystery how to reformulate all aspects of society in order to live sustainably and build an ecological civilization. It's not an easy job, but it's a job that we can certainly manage. We know all the pieces of it, but it requires that mental shift. And I'm seeing that awakening happen again and again and again. I mentioned all the corporate CEOs. That was big news for me. I mentioned Xi Jinping saying China will build no more coal plants in the rest of the world. That's a big awakening. I mean, these are huge shifts. So not everyone has woken up. We have other presidents and other countries that need a knock on the head in order to wake up. But I'm seeing enormous change, and that's, I hope, the energy that will go into the COP. While there are a lot of difficulties going into the COP, it's also quite clear that people know the change needs to happen. People are demanding the change. So whether it's in the COP, as I hope it is, or whether it takes a little longer, I really feel like we're on the cusp of dramatic change in taking care of climate and nature. And of course, that means taking care of each other as well. They all go together.
Such a beautiful ending. And your stubborn optimism.
Yes,
really wonderful, James. Thank you really for being with us today. And everyone who's attended, look out for a follow-up email. We're gonna produce a digest of the conversation that just took place. And we hope you'll join next time because the Welcome Change is a weekly series about the future we want to live and the role we can all play. We're gonna have exciting conversations lined up in the coming Wednesdays on Brazil's indigenous right and land stewardship, on how to turn illegal loggers into champions of sustainable forestry, and many more. And tomorrow we have the Ashoka Changemakers Summit that discusses again a planet and climate topic at 3 p.m. CET with 2 other Ashoka Fellows. We really welcome you there as well. And you can sign up to Welcome Change and ACMS by following the links in the chat. Thank you again, James, for being with us. Have good days, everyone, and see you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.